Hello and welcome to this little webinar I put together on your herbal education options. It is 2018 and I am here to help you make sense of what I like to call the Viriditas Arcana, or the green path, in these modern times. My name is Nicole Telkes. I am a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild, and I am the director of the Wildflower School of Botanical Medicine. So I wanted to kind of start with who I am and why I'm doing this webinar. So here's a little picture of me at an expo this last spring, and I have run the Wildflower School for about 17 years now, and I've been training herbalists and teaching for about 20 years. And I am a community herbalist, activist, and educator. And I'm just going to share my webcam briefly so you can kind of see that I'm here with you going through these options, and that yes, I'm a real person and I do most of my work on site with people, although our online options are growing more and more as I get comfortable with online options. So you'll see more and more coming up from us. So my goal of this webinar is to help you to answer some basic questions that I get asked a lot with our student inquiries. I get emails, I get phone calls, Facebook messages, whatever it is, and a lot of these questions are happening over and over. So I'm hoping that some of this can help you and can guide you on your path as an herbalist. And just remember, being an herbalist means that you're working with herbs. That can mean a lot of different things. You don't necessarily have to be an expert. You can have a working knowledge as a folk herbalist and be quite successful and happy. And I want to empower people to think outside of the box of institutionalized learning. So what do you want out of your training? So a lot of people come to us for kind of these basic reasons is what I see. Like when somebody inquires and they want to learn about herbal medicine or botanical medicine or holistic medicine, it's usually because they want to take care of their family more naturally, with less of a focus on pharmaceuticals perhaps, or reacting to illness. They want to know how to prevent illness and stay well. Some people are just curious about the natural world and they want to know what's growing around them and how to locate native plants that are also medicines, and perhaps someday, if they get skilled enough, collect some of their weeds that are growing around them. And some people, they go straight to herbalism because they're looking for a shift in their professional life and to make herbalism a business, which is a different reason than somebody who's just trying to stay well. Some people want to offer healthcare that's more accessible. We're living in a time in 2018 right now when in the US our healthcare system is pretty broken, and many people do not have the access or the money to be able to take care of their health the way they'd like to, or even their family's health. So herbalism is an affordable and viable option that about 80% of the world uses herbs. So I do not see herbalism as alternative or complementary. I actually see our allopathic system as alternative or complementary because many people don't have the access they need to it in the world, that is. So some people come to herbalism just to keep folk traditions alive. Maybe they have a lineage that their family has kept a sort of use of herbs, and they want to make sure that they understand herbs better so they can keep those folk traditions alive in their family. So that's another reason I see people come along and inquire. And then some people love being outside and growing plants, and they want to grow their own remedies. So they really want to know what plants they should grow, how they grow, what they can make out of them, how to make the remedies. So this is all the reasons that I usually see people come. So I'm going to kind of look at now questions you may want to ask yourself and places you may want to go if you're wanting to study herbs. So if it's self-study, my number one thought and advice as far as learning about plants is that self-study, the best self-study that you can do is to go sit with plants and go on hikes in the wild. And what that means is not just to sit down real quick, look at a plant, take a picture, and move on. That means go outside, find a comfortable space with a plant that really calls out to you or is striking, and sit for about half an hour to 45 minutes with that one plant and really study it. Be a keen observer. The best herbalists are ones who've really formed a good relationship through observation and study with plants, not just internally, but also outside with the plants to study them alive and interacting with nature. So going on hikes in the wild and getting to know your bioregion and where you live and what the natural world is like is an important part of self-study. I always recommend, if you're kind of dabbling, that one of the first things you may want to consider is to maybe find an herb conference or a festival in your region. And you may not even know that these exist, but you can actually go online, search in Google or whatever browser you're at, and or even some social media, and just search for herb conference or search for herb festival. And these are gatherings that usually happen in different parts of the country. This is not necessarily free. So I'm trying to think about free resources, but when I think about self-study and where to start, I really think going to a conference where there's a gathering of teachers and students, you'll get a lot of information that you can then digest and kind of decide where you may want to go with your training. So that's one recommendation I would also have. Another thing that I would say about self-study is to talk to elders in your community. Many elders that are living around you hold herbal knowledge and no one's asking them about it. So if you do find somebody who wants to, give you some information or help you to learn something, you want to give back to that person. So find a way to give back. Maybe it's helping them clean up their garden, or maybe it's making them some food. But always give back to people who share information with you freely. It's an exchange of energy. Libraries. I want to remind people about libraries because libraries are actually available online now. So you can get intra-library loans. Any book that you can find through Amazon or any bookseller, you can also find through your library. And if your local library doesn't have it, you request what's called an intra-library loan, and they can get that book sent over so you can borrow it and read it for free. So you do not need to pay for books. This library system may or may not exist that much longer. So we want to use it if we can. The libraries are our friends, and it's one of the great social services of the United States. So if you are in North America, in the United States, use your library. Another option that you may think of, that if you have a lot of internet access, is Google Books. So Google Books has done something really great, and I'm putting up resources on our library section of our website, on the Wildflower School website. And Google Books has scanned a bunch of old herb books that are considered open source. And these are herb books from doctors that practiced with herbs back in the 1850s and 1900s, or other books similar. So you can find a lot of books for free that are scanned and open source. Also, my old teacher, Michael Moore of the Southwest School of Botanical Medicine, did the same thing 30 odd years ago, 20 odd years ago, and those resources are up on the Southwest School of Botanical Medicine's website still, a bunch of scanned open source books that cover a lot in herbal medicine. So if you do choose to take a class online because it's free and you're just doing some self-study or you're reading some books, one thing I really want to kind of suggest we're living in a time where we have all this information coming at us, and what our job is now as students is to critically think through the information and who is feeding us this information and what their background is. So just because you can find that somebody has a bunch of YouTube videos on how to make herbal remedies doesn't necessarily mean that that person knows what they're talking about or has any background in using herbs. So you want to really research the person who's teaching, whether it's through videos or through books, and whether or not you also agree with their philosophies. Like what are their underlying philosophies of healing? Do you agree with their politics? Do you agree with who they are and where they're coming from? Because everyone's writing books and giving information based on their own lens. And so we want to make sure that the herbal information is also critically thought about. Just because there's evidence doesn't mean it's necessarily the way that a lot of herbalists use something, even if there's a lot of evidence to show something. So just throwing that out there. So certification. Some people come, and I'm going to kind of get more into now people who are thinking of taking a more formal course. And one of the things that happens is that people often ask me, well, what kind of certificate can I get? And where is this going to go? And what kind of letters am I going to have after my name? So certifications in the US related to herbal medicine have no legal standing if they're from independent schools or apprenticeship programs. So the state and national levels do not regulate herbalism as a practice. The only herbalists that are regulated in the United States are Chinese medicine herbalists. They have to take a big certification test, and then they're licensed as Chinese herbalists. If this is a Western herbalist or Ayurvedic or any sort of other herbalist, they're not licensed. They do not have any certificate that necessarily means that much, except to them. So while our school does give certificates, it's just so that we know where people are in their knowledge level when they come back to study further or not. So there are no regulations with who calls themselves a master herbalist, a clinical herbalist, certified herbalists. All those are made up qualifications. The only professional association in the United States is what we call the American Herbalist Guild. And many herbalists in the US may choose not to join the AHG, or they don't even know it exists because they're a traditional healer and it doesn't really have anything to do with their world. So it's just something to contemplate. And this really matters more when you're thinking about taking herbalism into a professional level more so than your home and family. So if you're thinking of studying with an herbalist or going to a school, these are some questions that I think you should meditate on before you start applying or looking up schools. I really think that you should be clear on what your expectations are. So ask yourself, and you might want to write these down as I'm speaking. Ask yourself, why do you want to get trained? Why do you want to get trained? So you might want to think about that. Is it for your home and family? Are you thinking of making a business? What kind of business are you thinking of making? Do you just want to study because you want to bring this into also maybe getting a nursing degree and try to figure out a way to combine that knowledge? What do you want to get out of the experience when you go and study with an herbalist or a school? What are you trying to learn? What is your expectation level there? Like so that you can make sure that the school or the herbalist that you're studying with is going to be able to match what your expectations are. How committed are you? So is this just something you're kind of interested in? If so, you've already gone a lot further than I would have thought you had, because this video is, to me, probably for people who are pretty committed, because you're getting through a lot of questions and information here. And do you have time to study? Are you going to need to study every week? Or do you have time to study every week? Or can you only do this maybe once a month and just think about it as a once a month thing? Or maybe it's just when you have time. Another question is, can you learn online? Because a lot of schools, like mine included, were only in person for a really long time. But I'm starting to do more and more online offerings as ways to deepen knowledge or help people repeat the knowledge that they may have missed a class, or they want to hear something again. Some people can't learn online. So you want to be really clear about how much time are you going to have to spend on a computer compared to online, or is there any online option or availability that you're going to be able to handle in your life? How do you learn best? Just a question. Do you know how you learn best? Do you learn best through experience? Do you learn best through reading? Do you learn best through reiterating, through homework? What is the best way of learning for you? Another question. Do you have time constraints? Do you have any kind of big family that you're trying to take care of, that you don't have a lot of time for going to classes, and you're going to have to do online? Even if you can't learn online well, maybe you have to, as you have no other choice. Maybe you have 2-3 jobs that you're trying to juggle, and this is just something you're trying to squeeze in there. And then one thing to really think about too, to meditate on, is how are you going to fund your education if money is involved? And a lot of times these are small schools, and we're going to talk more about that. And these are just people trying to offer what they know, and there's going to be money that's involved. So these are once you've meditated on and you could stop the video here and really think about that for a while if you needed to, and do some writing and journaling and meditate even, and come back to this. But we're going to move on to some general questions to ask the schools or teachers. So these are some things that I really think you should also think about if you're starting to interview and you say, yes, I want to go to a program, I want to go to a school, and this is where I really want to focus my energy, and I do have the time. So if you have made the decision that you do want to move on to a more formalized training or study of herbalism, these are some of the questions I would make sure and kind of interview the school about. Because there's a lot of schools and apprenticeship programs I've seen popping up over the past few years. And I think it's an important thing to, again, critically evaluate whether or not the school is a good fit for you, so you can get the best experience that is possible from them, or the teacher, or whoever you're deciding to study with. Should be a good fit. So how many hours of in-class time and homework and self-study is required, so that you can really get a good assessment of whether you have time in your life for the class? Like what is really going to be required of you? What's the class schedule and dates and times and location? Another good question to ask the school or the person you're considering studying with is, how long has that school or person been training folks? what was the start of their training and when, and how has it developed? What sorts of background do the instructors have, or the instructor? Are they a Western allopathic practitioner that started training people in herbalism? Or are they a traditional healer that uses herbs and has for multi-generational kind of lineage of herbalism? Have they taught for, many years, or is this a new thing? Not necessarily bad to have a new instructor. It's just good to know so you can understand where the instructor is coming from. And then what philosophy of healing is used? What's their perspective? Because you can imagine that if you go to an instructor or a school with somebody's background being Western allopathic medicine compared to, say, folk or traditional healing, that's going to be a different philosophy of healing. Some philosophies of healing might incorporate in the of mechanism where, if there's a symptom, use an herb for this symptom, while others may actually teach you a whole holistic philosophy of how to look at illness differently. So it really depends on who you're studying with, and you want to understand what philosophy is going to be used. Another question to ask a school or a teacher is, how long are their program or programs? Like how not just, maybe this one class or a program that you're doing. Do they have other ones that you can go deeper with? How do they work through those programs? If you've taken a program at another school, can you skip ahead? And I will say that because schools are so diverse and there's no formalized or structured way that herbalism is taught that's standardized, many schools, just because you went to one doesn't mean that you're going to be able to go into another and skip ahead to more advanced or their intermediate or advanced programs. You're going to need to be able to be evaluated as to whether or not that's possible. There's a lot of online trainings, and what you learn online does not necessarily translate to what is taught on site, and I can tell you that with a lot of experience. Another question to ask is, how do payments work? Are you going to have to come up with all of the money right away? Are you going to be able to have a payment plan? Do you have a credit card you could put it on? Do you have family members that you could ask? You're going to have to come up with a plan for your budget and how you're going to pay off a teacher or a school. Another thing to think about is inclusivity and diversity. And obviously, I think, first of all, having an acknowledgement at a school that there is some sort of awareness around inclusivity and diversity is really important. And asking that school or teacher outright, like, is there a social justice, health justice, or some sort of way that people are addressing issues surrounding inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility of, like, BIPOC folks or LGBTQIA, or is there any acknowledgement and understanding of social justice and health justice and environmental justice issues in the school itself, so that you can feel that your needs are being addressed as a student, especially if you may be in an underserved or under-acknowledged group of folks. So this is just something to also ask the school about, their policies. So another thing, if it is an herb school, and if you're not thinking of herb school, you can skip through ahead a little bit, because this is just for people who are kind of more interested in an actual formalized training model. And since I do have one, this is the kind of stuff that we think through. So if not, you can skip ahead a couple minutes and we can get into some other things. But what is the teacher to class ratio? how many students are going to be in your classroom with you and how many teachers. And so imagine this. You go on a plant walk and there are 30 students on a plant walk. Do you think it's going to be easy to hear this teacher? At our school, we limit our plant walks to 13 people, unless it's like a free thing or something that we do for the community. But we limit it to about 13 people in a class because we feel like that way everyone can see the teacher, they can see the plant, things like that. So plant walks compared to on-site classes, you may not be fine with a larger teacher to class ratio. 20 people in a classroom, no biggie. You can still hear and see everything that the teacher is talking about. Making herbal remedies and things are different. So you're going to really want to think about teacher to class ratio. And where are the class locations? Is this all going to be inside or outside? What are your expectations there? Can you do outdoor walks? Do you have the ability level to be able to participate in all aspects of the classes? And sometimes with a small school, they don't have the ability to take and have accessibility for everyone because they just don't have it's just a single teacher and they're just trying to make it work. And they have a very low budget and they just don't have the ability to offer everything they would like to. So make sure it's a good fit before you get involved with it, especially a private school. If the herb school is associated with a college or some sort of higher education institution, usually the accessibility stuff is a lot easier. But you want to make sure that you fit well with the small independent school or teacher. Also, you might want to ask about work trade and inclusivity and whether or not there's any partial scholarships available. A lot of schools can't afford to do that because it's just somebody who's offering their time and they need to pay for their groceries, etc. But sometimes people do offer some work trade and accessibility because a lot of herbalists came to this for the same reason as the students, that they want to make herbal medicine accessible. So another question to ask a school is, are you going to have to purchase any books or other supplies? And how much are those supplies going to cost? Again, can you test out of certain sections if you think that you have the appropriate knowledge base? Another thing to think about is, are there other instructors? Or are you going to have mainly one instructor the whole time? You better like that instructor. And this has come up in the herbal community recently, but again, knowing the background and checking in with other students who've already gone to that school, you might want to get opinions from people who've been, to make sure that the instructor or the teacher that you're considering studying with is a good fit for you. Not all humans fit together that well. So the number of hours, the way things are thought about in herbalism, and I've been looking for, other schools and my school and just kind of evaluating how costs are. And generally what you're looking at is that the amount of hours of instruction for a more formal or some sort of apprenticeship program is generally $10 to $15 an hour is what I'm seeing, depending on the region or the herbalist. So you would look at the cost of your program, and then you'd actually ask people, how many actual hours of material am I going to be required to be on site or online for to study with? And then how much of it is homework and offsite? Because sometimes some schools include certain things and other schools don't. So you really want to understand, like, how many actual hours of instruction are you getting for the price that's being put out there. So I've seen some programs where they seem very expensive, but then when you look at how many actual hours you're getting, it's a fair price. $10 to $15 an hour, you're not going to find anything like that in most professions. So it depends on who you're studying with and where and all of that, but it's a pretty fair price from what I've seen. And I know that people are able to make it work in their budgets, most working class folks. So making a career out of your training. So some people, we're going to move on to talking about if you decided to go deeper with this and you maybe want to make this your profession. Because this is a question I get a lot, like what kind of career opportunities are out there for herbalists if I go to your school? And I can tell you right now, not much in 2018. This is not a very career oriented training. This is, most of the time people go to herb school, it's a passion and a dream. And even in our clinical herbalism program, a clinical herbalist is going to have to be an educator to show people what they're doing and how, because not a lot of people understand what herbalists do and don't do. And every herbalist, because it's not regulated, does things differently. So it's, again, critically evaluating who you're working with and what they're offering. I do consider myself a clinical herbalist because I see people in a clinical setting repeatedly. And I do not diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But clinical herbalism or any other type of herbalist, community herbalist, registered herbalist, your profession, your career is going to be what you make out of it. People who are successful professionally are going to be people who are motivated, self-starters with an entrepreneurial brain. If you sit there and you just say, oh, I have all this training, why isn't it working out? You're going to have to get additional business skills, maybe trainings in business, maybe even a business loan. You will not find a bunch of job leads, especially in many parts of the U.S. Northeast, I've seen more job leads, but in the South, there are very few job leads for herbalists. With persistent scouring, you may come upon a few potential job leads, and that also may mean you have to move to get to that job. But persistence, passion, and education can get you to great places. So if this is your passion, if you are excited about herbalism and you want to make it your livelihood and you are committed to it, you will get to where you want to be, but you have to be persistent and you have to be open that you might need more training. Besides herbalism. Herbalism is herbalism. Business is business. To merge the two together requires skills on both sides of the coin. So I want you to remember from this, there are no regulatory agencies for practitioners, but there are regulatory agencies for product makers. So if you are going to represent yourself as a clinician, make sure if you are not licensed to do so, you are not diagnosing, prescribing, or treating anything medical. And that's something that we teach a lot in our clinical program. But I just think that as you start to study herbalism, no matter who you are, from where you are in the US, you have to be very aware of the laws pertaining to the medical world and non-medical world. And herbalism is considered non-medical because you are not licensed. This was something that the AMA created in the early 1900s to keep everyone out that was not licensed. So it was supposed to be a safety thing. And it's, a lot of people question some of the reasoning now, but especially with herbalism. So if you plan to go into manufacturing, a lot of people don't know this. If you're thinking, I want to start an herb business, I want to have an herb company, I want to make products, there are new regulations with making products, and they're called good manufacturing practices, and that's going to be required that you follow GMPs or good manufacturing practices if you're going to start an herb company. Now, there are people who have figured out ways to avoid that, But if you plan to make a living and make a business that's growing, I would recommend knowing what these good manufacturing practices are so that you know what you're going to be required of if your business happens to boom and you need to take a handle, and move it in a legal direction. So, money and accessibility. This is another big question that I get. A lot of schools are homegrown, and I want people to really understand that many of these homegrown schools and teachers do not have any way to cover your tuition. So if there's a scholarship at the school or work trade, the teachers or school is just going to take a hit, and it's going to be sustainable only in a very small amount. The other side of that is if an instructor just keeps giving stuff away, and I've seen this happen where they didn't feel right charging and then they just couldn't do it because they had to go get another job and then they couldn't instruct anyone. So it's this double-edged sword where we want to make herbalism a medicine for the people, a lot of us, but we also have to take care of our lives. So you're going to find this as a balancing act all through herb schools. A school, by definition, because I looked this up, it's an institution or organization that has this educational program associated with it. Most herb schools are not institutionalized, which means they're not accredited by any state. They cannot provide financial aid. They cannot obtain scholarships. The GI Bill cannot be used with them. And this is something I've been researching and trying to accommodate for a while, even as a school myself, but I am not accredited and I cannot get financial aid for folks, and I have not been able to accept the GI Bill, unfortunately. Or I would accept the GI Bill. The GI Bill it cannot be applied to herb schools that I know of. And if I'm wrong, that's great. But I cannot find a way to have it used. So I've had a couple people ask that, and I wanted to address it. There are a few schools that are exceptions to this because there may be some herbal training programs through a local community college or through another college like a naturopathic medicine university. So universities and colleges sometimes can get financial aid so that it's accessible. Their programs are accessible. But unless it is a larger institution like this, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to find schools that can just swallow, giving away a bunch of free instruction or work trade off most of their programs. So many herb schools really operate more like an apprenticeship. And the only way for them to be able to offer classes is for people to pay. Even if the education is marketed as an apprenticeship, expect there's going to be a charge. So if you see herbal apprenticeship program, there's probably going to be a charge associated with that. And I've noticed that some students have been surprised with this. Like, why would an apprenticeship where you're helping an herbalist out be something that they're charging for? And I can tell you from experience that most of the time when apprentices come into the apothecary or the garden, they're learning, and that learning experience is vital for their development as an herbalist, but it doesn't necessarily save the school or the herbalist any time to have apprentices next to them in the garden or apothecary. It's actually more time and energy. So that's why paying for it allows that teacher or that herbalist to have people with them and train them how to be in an apothecary, how to make herb products, how to label, even how to weed is even something to learn. So this is all really, cultivating these intimate experiences with apprenticeships are going to cost money. And if we don't live in a world where these teachers can afford to trade away knowledge. So even if you can find somebody, some cultures are very much not able to accept money because that's their culture. They cannot accept money for their knowledge. And so if they can't accept money because that's their cultural heritage, then find other ways to give back. And that may be buying groceries for your teacher, or fixing something in their house that's broken. But find a way to give back is always what I will recommend. So here, I'm going to just talk about the Wildflower School and how we do things. So here's some photos of us doing some outdoor things. So it's hot. That's why everyone looks looks a little tired in these photos. But this is in Texas, so they're outdoors and they're doing permaculture projects and things like that. But we do everything from apprenticeships to single classes to online and on-site opportunities to programs that range from beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So we have a lot going on. Many schools are a lot simpler and they'll have one apprenticeship program or just a few single classes and maybe a program. So it really depends on the school and again, what you're wanting to get out of that school. What are you wanting to get out of your experience? We wanted to bring people as deep as we could, and we have a crew of amazing teachers that make it happen. So we have a lot of folks to draw from and different knowledge levels and different experiences. So we wanted to provide a diverse experience of different types of things. And then some people just want to work with one herbalist. And my school and the Wildflower School, we have a cap at how many people we take in. So this is not a plug to make everyone come to the Wildflower School because we couldn't possibly accommodate everyone. My goal here is to make sure that you can make some good choices wherever you are in the world listening to this as to what the best option for you is in your herbal education. Because I keep answering these questions over and over. So I'm hoping that I can send this out to some folks, or some people stumble across this on YouTube or something, and they can have some of their questions answered and they can get some more ideas about how to move forward in herbalism. So to end this little webinar that I have made with love, and I'm not going to even edit because I don't have time to edit, and I did this because I care about all of you. And I'm not doing this to spend hours on the computer editing my ums and my so's. But so deal with it, but know this to end. Information is not knowledge. Evidence-based knowledge is not the only way to know things. So the practice of herbalism, as I know it, comes from a combination of what I like to think of as folk knowledge. I love the science that we use to evaluate things also. I love tradition. I love learning from experience, and I love intuition. So I think the practice of herbalism as I know it is not just about how much you know about something or what you consider to be the best. It's this beautiful diversity of information that you've brought together to create this colorful practice that can guide you through your life, whether it's keeping your family healthy, keeping yourself healthy, maintaining more optimum health if you had a chronic illness that you're trying to deal with yourself, or maybe it's because you want to bring herbalism to your community, or you want to make things for your community, or you want to help other people find a better balance. So herbalism is about learning how to remember our relationship with the natural world. We already have the relationship. Our DNA has been recycled for thousands of years on this planet. We are all a part of everything. So think about the fact that plants and humans have this really intimate relationship. We breathe out, they breathe in. They breathe out, we breathe in. There's this constant circulation of interaction and this really intimate relationship. So if you feel drawn to herbs, it's not a mistake. It's something that's innate in our nature to want to work with plants. We've been doing it for generations and generations. Just remember, the green path is a lifelong search for knowledge, and it changes with who's using the plants. So it's evolving. It's a folk traditions that are evolving. It's not just the science that's gone into understanding the complex chemical phytochemistry, of what a plant is doing. That's really interesting, but there's more. That's part of it. So it's this lifelong search for knowledge. And I invite you to join us on the Viriditas Arcana. This is something that is a mystery and magic, as well as science and wellness, and something that you can use every day in your life. And I hope this helps you on your path. Green blessings. I'll just say hi again so that you know I'm still here, really with you. Hi. And we're going to end there, and have a great day. And if you need anything, our website is wildflowerherbschool.com, wildflowerherbschool.com, and our email is wildflowerherbschool@gmail.com. So I'll go ahead and end it there. And I guess I could have written that, but that's all I'm going to say. wildflowerherbschool.com. Have a wonderful life.